For a series so often mistaken for a handbook on cool, the most useful lesson is how thoroughly uncool the gangster life actually is. The mythology promises honor, loyalty, and swagger. The reality is petty cruelty, impulsive appetites, and men who chant family while treating families as disposable packaging. The early charm works as bait, jokes, rituals, a plate of pasta, until the story follows its premise and the charm curdles into entitlement. Exploitation is dressed as tradition, violence is marketed as respect, and self-pity is sold as depth. Romantic criminality becomes what it always was: fluorescent lighting, bad carpet, and the spiritual odor of processed meat. The Code is a bedtime story for adults who prefer destiny to responsibility. And the men are not tragic princes so much as predatory mediocrities who leech off everyone in reach, then complain that gratitude is insufficient. The show's most consistent curriculum is addiction and consequence. Gambling is stripped of cinematic rush and presented as a grinding conversion of optimism into debt and debt into desperation. A dingy room, endless hours, and the certainty that the bill arrives with interest. It works as the best anti-gambling advertisement because it is dreary, repetitive, and final. The broader point extends to every vice on display. Every indulgence, every lapse in discipline, every appetite treated as a right eventually demands payment, and the payment is never polite. Leadership is treated as a lonely job for people least qualified to be alone with their thoughts. The famous lament about being number one is not wisdom but complaint. Every decision affects everything. The boss ends up isolated, and the crown feels heavy after insisting on wearing it. Instead of humility, the role produces resentment that others do not suffer with enough enthusiasm. The same men who demand obedience cannot tolerate accountability. Betrayal becomes business, and protection becomes another word for ownership. Paranoia becomes etiquette. Trust is a liability in a world built on betrayal, so spouses, children, friends, and parents are treated as potential threats rather than sources of comfort. Unknown phone calls are answered like interrogations. Visitors are scanned for hidden microphones. And even dinner payment becomes power choreography. Defer to the patriarch. Accept that provider status is part of the performance. And never mistake courtesy for equality. Economic wisdom is reduced to extraction. Do not squeeze a mark dry today when he can be bled next week, and the week after that. Violence is less a last resort than a communication style. When it is chosen decisively, disproportionately, and early, because hesitation invites retaliation. This is not advice, it is diagnosis. The worldview of men who cannot negotiate, apologize, or regulate emotion, so they substitute force and call it respect. The series also punctures bravado with biology. In moments of terror, even tough men revert to childhood, calling for their mothers as if muscle can negotiate with mortality. Mental health is depicted with more honesty than the characters deserve. Panic attacks arrive as inconvenient facts, not poetic symbols, and the narrative makes clear that ignoring the mind does not make it disappear. It simply finds new ways to speak. Therapy becomes a mirror the protagonist consults when convenient and rejects when uncomfortable, illustrating a central irony. Insight without accountability is merely another performance. Depression is framed as rage turned inward, a pressure gauge for unresolved conflict, and a reminder that money and intimidation do not immunize anyone from misery. If anything, power concentrates misery by eliminating honest connection. Then there is the domestic satire, arguably the sharpest knife in the drawer. Food is love language, status symbol, and battlefield all at once. And the series dispenses culinary instruction with almost comic sincerity. There are commandments about finishing pasta under heat with sauce, starchy water, and butter so the noodles absorb flavor. Enriching scrambled eggs with a controlled spoon of sour cream. Assembling lasagna with sweet sausage pieces and basil leaves tucked under the cheese. Saving baked ziti for the right occasion. Slicing garlic so thin it dissolves into oil. And treating fresh produce as both moral virtue and running joke, priced by the pound. The tenderness at the stove is real, which only sharpens the irony that tenderness elsewhere is so rare. Small practicalities stick because they are specific. Wash hands after tying shoes, because filth migrates. Never park in piles of leaves. Check takeout before leaving, unless you want a theatrical meltdown over the wrong order. Even barbarism gets logistics. Undo the seatbelt before a drive-by. Because planning matters even when the plan is obscene. These details underline how criminality colonizes routine, turning hygiene, shopping, and hospitality into extensions of control. Culturally, the series is a study in identity weaponized for comfort. Pride becomes grievance. Grievance becomes permission. Slurs, scapegoats, and casual bigotry are not charming flavor, but evidence of insecurity searching for a target. And the narrative shows how quickly blame is outsourced to whoever is most convenient. It also mocks the audience impulse to treat quotation as analysis. Nostalgia is ridiculed as the lowest form of conversation because it functions as avoidance of the present, of the future, and of any meaningful self-examination. Even the iconic style rules, such as the obsession with appearances and the decree that a boss must not dress too casually, read less like tradition and more like men clinging to costume because character is absent. The show slips in blunt economic maxims, delivered with the confidence of people who have never built anything honest. Buy land because it is finite. Chase the latest profitable hustle. Keep an envelope ready when tribute is due. Never become indebted to predatory people, because the debt is designed to outlive you. It is practical advice wrapped in corruption, which is the point. Even a criminal ecosystem develops etiquette, and etiquette is simply coercion with better table manners. Under all the jokes sits an existential refrain. Do not expect happiness, because disappointment is common. People fail, and in the end, you die in your own arms. The series is not nihilistic for fashion. It is nihilistic because the characters insist on building lives that cannot produce peace. And yet, it offers a sober counterexample by implication. Live simply, discipline impulses, choose decency when it is inconvenient, and refuse the fantasy that cruelty is strength. It even teaches, inadvertently, the etiquette of self-preservation. Avoid criminals, avoid their hangouts, avoid their favors, because proximity to small crimes is how ordinary people become prey in time anyway. The final takeaway is not a slogan or a recipe, but the unglamorous recognition that every day is a gift, even when life is ordinary, and that the only way to escape the big nothing is to stop manufacturing it through appetite, avoidance, and harm. Subscribe.